The morning started the way most mornings had since Dennis died: quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against you as if waiting for you to say something first. I stood in the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone lukewarm, staring out the window above the sink. That's when I noticed it. The garage door was open at first. It didn't register as strange, just one of those small things you tell yourself you'll fix in a minute. But then I remembered Dennis. In 43 years of marriage, he had never ever left that garage door open overnight. It was his temple, his retreat, the one place in our house that truly belonged to him. Even after retirement, he spent hours there, tinkering with the same car he'd been restoring for 2 decades. That 1967 Shelby GT500 was more than just metal and engine, it was a memory. One he built piece by piece with his own hands. But Dennis had been gone for 8 months now. I set the mug down carefully, afraid the sound might break the stillness. The morning light slanted across the kitchen counter, soft and golden. Dust motes floated lazily in the beam. Everything looked ordinary to ordinary except for that open door. I slid the back door open, and warm spring air brushed against my face. April had come early that year, carrying the smell of cut grass and rain-soaked soil. Dennis would have said it was a perfect day for polishing chrome. I stepped outside, the hem of my robe catching the breeze. The yard was quiet except for the distant hum of a lawnmower somewhere. Down the street, the garage sat at the edge of our small backyard. Its concrete path cracked from age, weeds pushing through like defiant little soldiers. I hadn't been out there much since the funeral. Couldn't bring myself to face this space where he'd spent so much of his time. But now, something in me needed to see it. My slippers scuffed the path as I walked. I could already picture him in my mind-blue work shirt, sleeves rolled up, a rag in his back pocket, humming along to that same old classic rock station. CCR for the win, he used to joke, his voice deep and warm. He never sang when he knew I was listening, but sometimes I'd hear him through the kitchen window, off-key but happy. When I reached the garage, the sight hit me like a slow-moving punch. Empty. The space where the Shelby had sat for 20 years gone. The oil stain on the concrete floor was still there. Dark and familiar, shaped like a long memory that refused to fade. The pegboard on the back wall still held his tools, each one outlined in black markers so he'd always know what belonged where. The red toolbox was closed, and beside it sat his old radio. The one he'd fixed 3 times just because he hated throwing anything away. But his car was missing. My breath caught. For a second, I thought maybe Brian had moved it. Maybe the neighbors borrowed the space. Maybe I'd forgotten something, anything. But no, I knew that wasn't it. I hadn't seen the Shelby move since Dennis passed. I stepped inside slowly, smell hitting me: motor oil, old leather. It's a faint trace of that orange hand soap Dennis used to scrub the grease off his hands. It was like he was still here, hidden somewhere between the smell of oil and the sound of silence. My knees felt weak. I reached for the workbench to steady myself. His work journal lay there, open to a page covered in his small, tidy handwriting. I ran my fingers over the ink as if touching it could bring him back. The date at the top read, 3 weeks before Dennis passed. Almost done. 20 years on this beauty. Can't wait to teach Carol to drive her properly. Our retirement road trip starts next summer. I closed my eyes. He'd been so proud of that car. Spent every weekend under its hood, wiping, tightening, tuning, sometimes just staring at it like a man admiring a dream come to life. We used to joke that he loved that car almost as much as he loved me. Now, both the man and his machine were gone. I closed the journal and placed it exactly where it had been. Old habits die hard. The garage light flickered above me, buzzing faintly. A thin layer of dust coated the hood of the radio. Everything else looked untouched. Everything except the empty space. My heart was pounding now, a slow, heavy drum in my chest. Think. Carol, breathe. 43 years as a nurse teaches you things: control, composure, the art of breathing through panic. So I did what I'd always told my patients: in through the nose, out through the mouth. But it didn't help. because I already knew what my heart was. Whispering something wasn't right. I walked around the space, half expecting to find a note, a clue, something. The shelves along the wall still held his waxes and rags, bottles of polish neatly lined up. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing out of place. Except the car. Outside, the rumble of an approaching engine made me turn. A sleek black BMW pulled into the driveway. My son's car. Brian. My chest tightened again, but for a different reason this time. Brian hadn't been by much lately. Too busy, he always said. Busy with work, busy with Vanessa, busy with life. The passenger door opened and she stepped out. Vanessa. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect clothes. Even her sunglasses looked expensive. I'd never quite figured her out. She smiled a lot, but her eyes always seemed to be somewhere else, calculating, assessing. They walked toward me. Brian slower than her, hands buried in his pockets. Shoulders tight like a man already guilty of something. Mom, he said, voice low. I didn't answer. My eyes flicked past him to the empty space behind me. Where's the car, Brian? He hesitated. The air between us went still. That's what I came to talk to you about. He said finally. I felt it then, an ache deep in my stomach, the kind that knows bad news before it's spoken. Where is it? Brian swallowed, looked at the ground. I sold it. The words didn't make sense at first. They just hung there weightless, absurd. Then they landed like a brick. You what? I sold the car, he repeated. Yesterday? The sound around me faded, the birds, the wind, the hum of distant traffic. All gone. Just the echo of his words in my head. You sold your father's car, I whispered. Brian's jaw clenched. It was just sitting there, Mom. You don't even drive it. It was time to let it go. I stared at him, at my only son, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize him. Dennis had once said that people reveal their true character not when they're broke, but when they're desperate. I wondered then what kind of desperation had driven my son to sell his father's dream. And I wondered, quietly, if this morning's silence had been a warning all along. Asterisk, for a long moment, none of us spoke. The garage was quiet except for the faint buzz of the light overhead and the distant chirping of birds outside. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, slow, heavy, unbelieving. You sold it? I repeated, my voice barely more than a whisper. Brian nodded once, quick and defensive, like he wanted to get it over with. I sold the Shelby yesterday. The words didn't fit in my head. My husband had spent 20 years rebuilding that car, sanding, painting, fixing, tuning. Every bolt told a story. Every scratch had a memory. It wasn't just metal. It was Dennis's patience made visible. His pride, his joy, his promise. Why? My voice cracked on the word. Brian's shoulders lifted in a helpless shrug. I needed the money. I felt something inside me twist. For what? He hesitated, glancing back toward the driveway where Vanessa stood, half hidden behind her sunglasses. She didn't move closer. Just watched. Vanessa's been planning this Paris trip for months, he said finally. It's important for her business, networking. I couldn't let her down. There it was, said so casually. Like the trip to Paris and his father's legacy were on the same shelf, and one had to be sold to afford the other. You sold your father's car? I said, my voice shaking now, to buy your wife a vacation. It's not like that. Mom, he said quickly. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I snapped. I didn't raise my voice often. Years in the ICU taught me the power of calm. But this wasn't calm. This was betrayal, quiet, personal, unforgivable. That car was part of your father. I said, he built it for us. It's for you. He wrote about it in his journal. He said Dad's gone, Brian interrupted, louder than he meant to. He's been gone for 8 months, Mom. You don't drive. You don't even come out here. It was just sitting here collecting dust. Just sitting here. Asterisk, I stared at him. My son, the boy who used to hand his father wrenches with grease-streaked fingers. The man who'd forgotten what those afternoons meant. Vanessa started walking toward us then. The click of her heels sharp on the concrete. She carried herself like she was walking into a meeting, not the middle of a family heartbreak. "Carol," she said smoothly, "we're not here to fight. What's done is done." Her voice was calm, reasonable, the tone of someone who's always right. I turned to her slowly. "This is between me and my son." She smiled a tight, polished smile. "I'm his wife. What's between you and him is between all of us now." Brian looked down. He didn't say anything. Vanessa went on, her tone clipped and professional. "Brian needed that money. Carol, the car was just sitting unused. It made sense to sell it. You should be proud he got a fair price. $15,000 for a vehicle that old is generous." 15,000. I almost laughed. Generous, Dennis. Had once been offered over 100,000 for the Shelby at a car show, and he turned it down without blinking. Said it wasn't about money. My throat tightened. "You think you understand what that car meant, but you don't." Vanessa's sunglasses hit her eyes, but I could feel her gaze cold, assessing. "What it meant," she said lightly, "was a car in a garage. Nothing more. You can't live in the past forever, Carol." The audacity of it made me go still. There are moments when anger burns hot and fast, but this was different. This was slow, controlled, the kind that turns cold over time and stays there. "Get out," I said quietly. Brian looked up, startled. "Mom, both of you, leave." "Mom, please. You took something your father spent half his life building and sold it without asking me. You didn't just sell his car, Brian. You sold his memory." For a second, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who built model cars at the kitchen table. The one who used to fall asleep in Dennis's lap while they watched races on TV. For a second, he looked like that boy again, ashamed, confused. Small dot, but then Vanessa put her hand on his arm. Red nails, perfect manicure, possessive, controlling. "We're not discussing this," she said. "It's over. The car's gone and we leave for Paris tomorrow. You can be angry, but it won't change anything." I looked straight at her. It always changes something. She tilted her head, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "We'll send you pictures," she said. "You'd love it there. The architecture, the museums, very romantic." The cruelty in that comment wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut. She knew exactly what she was saying. Brian's eyes flickered. He opened his mouth, but no words came. They turned to leave. Vanessa led the way, Brian following like a shadow. He looked back once, just once, from the end of the driveway. I stood there in my slippers, arms crossed, framed in the doorway of the empty garage. I didn't wave. I didn't move. The BMW door shut. The engine started. And they drove away. When the sound of the car faded, silence came rushing back. I stood in that empty garage for a long time, unable to move. The air smelled like him, Dennis oil, leather, and the faint citrus of his hand soap. His coffee mug still sat on the shelf, the handle worn smooth from years of use. His journal was on the bench. His tools hung in their perfect rows. Everything was still here. Everything except the car. I reached out and touched the empty air above the oil stain, my fingers trembling slightly. It was strange, standing there in the same place where Dennis used to hum and whistle and tinker. And realizing the only sound now was my own breathing. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't just visit once. It circles back dressed in different clothes, sometimes sadness, sometimes anger, sometimes disbelief. I thought I'd already met them all. But that morning, standing in the hollow echo of what used to be his space, I met a new one, betrayal. I turned off the light, locked the garage door for the first time since Dennis died, and walked back to the house. My slippers whispered against the concrete. The coffee on the counter had gone cold. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug even though the warmth was gone. Outside, the garage door stood shut, sealing the silence inside. It wasn't until the next morning, just as the sun began to rise over Oakwood Drive, that the phone rang. And that's when everything changed. Asterisk. The phone rang at exactly 7 in the morning. I'd been awake for hours, sitting at the kitchen table, Dennis's work journal open in front of me. I wasn't really reading, just staring at the same line over and over again. Almost done. Can't wait to teach Carol to drive her properly. It was strange how handwriting could feel alive, like his voice had found a way to live on in ink. I traced the words with my finger until the ringing finally broke through my thoughts. The screen said unknown number. For a second, I almost didn't answer. After all, who calls this early unless it's bad news? But something in me, call it instinct, or maybe Dennis's quiet nudge, told me to pick up. Hello? A man's voice, rough and uncertain, came through the line. Mrs. Bennett. Yes. This is Tom Graves. From Graves Classic Auto. I frowned. The name meant nothing to me. I'm sorry, who? He hesitated, his voice cracking slightly. I have your husband's car. My grip on the phone tightened. My husband's what? His car. The Shelby. My heart gave a sharp jolt. That's not possible, I said. My son sold it. Yes, ma'am. He sold it to me 2 days ago. But I need you to come to the dealership. There's something Dennis wanted you to know. I felt my pulse in my throat. I don't understand. Dennis passed away 8 months ago. I know, the man said softly. I was at his funeral. He was a good man. I should have spoken to you then, but I didn't. I couldn't. His voice broke a little, like he'd been holding something back for a long time. Please, Mrs. Bennett, it's important. Can you come today? I remembered him then vaguely. A man in a dark suit standing at the back of the funeral home. I'd noticed him because he'd cried quietly during the service. But when I went to greet people afterward, he was gone. Where are you? I asked. He gave me the address, an industrial park on the east side of town. I'll be there in half an hour. I hung up before I could change my mind. The drive across town felt longer than it should have. Morning light poured over the rooftops as I passed the hospital where I had worked for 40 years. Nurses in blue scrubs hurried through the parking lot the same way I once had. I'd always thought that after Dennis died, I'd start volunteering there again. But somehow the days just blurred together, each one quietly folding into the next. When I turned into the industrial area, everything looked the same. Rows of gray buildings, wide streets, and the smell of hot concrete even though the sun had barely climbed the sky. Graves Classic Auto sat at the very end of the street. A clean white building with glass windows and a neat row of vintage cars behind a chain-link fence. Every one of them gleamed like polished coins. A man stood outside the entrance, waiting. He was in his 60s, maybe older, gray hair, weathered face, hands in his pockets. The look in his eyes told me he already knew who I was. Mrs. Bennett. He asked as I stepped out of the car. Yes, you're Mr. Graves. He nodded and held out his hand. His palm was rough, the handshake firm but trembling. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you'd believe me. Not sure I do, I admitted. You said you have my husband's car. He nodded toward the building. It's inside. Come with me, please. We walked through a wide showroom that smelled faintly of oil and polish. Cars lined the walls, Mustangs, Corvettes, a gleaming '59 Cadillac, all restored to perfection. I remember Dennis, Tom said as we walked. He used to come to shows out here. Talked about that Shelby like it was a member of the family. He said he wasn't just rebuilding a car. He was rebuilding a promise. I felt a lump rise in my throat. He told me once that the Shelby was his way of staying busy after retirement. I said, but really, I think it was his way of staying alive. Tom stopped at a door marked private workshop and turned to me. Before I show you the car, there's something you should know. He looked down as if trying to find the right words. 25 years ago, Dennis saved my life. I blinked. Saved your life, he nodded. I was younger then. Reckless, wanted to open a classic car dealership, but no bank would touch me. Bad credit, no collateral, just a dream and a lot of foolish confidence. Dennis believed in me. A man I barely knew co-signed a loan that kept this place alive. He said everyone deserves one chance to prove they're more than their mistakes. He smiled faintly. I paid every penny back. But the truth is, I owed him more than money. My throat tightened. He never told me. Tom's eyes softened. He wouldn't have. That's who he was. He took a deep breath and pushed open the workshop door. Your son brought the Shelby here on Wednesday. I recognized it the second I saw it. I told him I'd buy it, no questions asked. I stepped inside. The smell of wax and gasoline filled the air. Under the bright white lights, cars sat in a row under gray covers. Tom led me to the last one. He pulled the cover back, and there it was. The Shelby burgundy paint. Polished chrome. The same leather seats Dennis had restored himself. The car looked alive, like it had been waiting. I walked toward it slowly, hand trembling as I reached out and touched the hood. The metal was cool under my fingertips, smooth as glass. I thought it was gone, I whispered. Tom nodded. I bought it from Brian for $15,000. His voice darkened. He didn't know what he was selling. Mrs. Bennett, this car is worth over $180,000. Dennis restored it to museum quality. The number didn't make sense. I stared at the car, trying to absorb the difference between what it was worth and what my son had given it away for. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Tom took a step closer, lowering his voice. Because Dennis made me promise something 2 years ago. He came to see me one afternoon and said, Tom, if anything ever happens to me, make sure Carol finds what I left for her. I froze. What he left? Tom nodded. He asked me to help him install a hidden compartment in the car. Said it was for you and only you. He made me swear I'd keep it secret until the day came. I stared at him, barely breathing. He gestured toward the dashboard. Behind the radio, press here, then pull back gently. He stepped away, giving me space. Take your time. I'll be outside. When he left, the room felt impossibly quiet. I sat in the driver's seat, the same place Dennis must have sat when he built this secret. The leather creaked softly beneath me. I did as Tom said. Pressed the edge near the radio. Pulled gently, and the panel came loose with a faint click. Inside was a small compartment hidden deep in the dashboard. My fingers brushed against something, a thick manila folder, an envelope with my name written on it in Dennis's careful handwriting. And a small wooden box with a key inside. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just sat there, the folder on my lap. My husband's name echoing in my mind. 8 months gone, and still, somehow, Dennis was speaking to me. Asterisk, for a long time. I didn't open the envelope. I just sat there in Dennis's car, the engine silent, my hands resting on the folder that felt heavier than it should. The smell inside the Shelby was the same as it had always been. Oil, leather, a hint of that citrus soap. It was like the air itself remembered him. Tom waited quietly by the doorway, giving me privacy. The white lights above hummed faintly. Finally, I took a breath and slid my finger under the envelope seal. Inside was a single letter, written in Dennis's handwriting. The sight of those small, neat letters made my chest ache. The date at the top stopped me cold, 2 months before he died. Carol, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you while I was alive. You'd have wanted to face this together, but I couldn't risk it, not until I had proof. There's something I discovered, something I couldn't ignore. It's about Vanessa. My breath caught. I read on. Her real name isn't Vanessa Bennett. It's Vanessa Cortland, or at least, that's one of them. She's done this before. Twice that I've found so far. The folder in this compartment has everything I've gathered. Photographs, documents, statements from others she's hurt. Her pattern is always the same. She marries men with aging parents and family assets. She convinces the sons that their parents are in decline, that the house should be sold, the money reinvested. And then, when it's done, she disappears. I could feel my pulse in my ears. She'll try to do it again, Carol, to us. I confronted her once carefully and saw it in her eyes, that calm, rehearsed smile. She's dangerous. Brian won't believe me without concrete proof, and I haven't finished collecting it. But if you're reading this, I didn't make it in time. My hand trembled as I turned the page. The key inside the box is for our safe deposit box at First National Bank. Box 447. Inside are stock certificates from a patient I helped in 1994. Check the value. It's more than you think. You'll be safe financially. Tom knows everything about the compartment. He's a good man. Trust him. Protect yourself. Protect our son. He's not cruel, just blind. Vanessa knows how to make people see what she wants them to. She's done it before, and she'll do it again if no one stops her. I love you. I always have. And even now, I'm still protecting you. Dennis, when I finished reading, I realized my hands were shaking. The letter slipped from my fingers and landed on my lap. Dennis had known for almost 2 years. He'd been quietly investigating our daughter-in-law, the woman who smiled across the dinner table, who hugged me at holidays, who spoke of family as if she meant it, and all that time, he carried this secret alone. Tears came before I could stop them. They weren't the quiet kind either. These were the kind that come from somewhere deeper, not just grief, but fury, love, and something like awe. Because even after death, Dennis was still trying to protect me. I reached for the manila folder. The cover was thick and worn, edges creased. Inside were photographs, documents, and several pages of Dennis's meticulous notes. The first photo showed Vanessa at a wedding. Different man, older, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. The next, another wedding, another man. Both taken years before she ever met Brian, that were marriage certificates. Vanessa Cortland married Stanley, right? Phoenix, Arizona. June 2019. Vanessa Cortland married George Murphy. Tampa, Florida, March 22-1.2 marriages. To men, I turned the page. Newspaper clippings followed. Local man's mother's life savings vanish after sale of home. Family business sold in suspected fraud scheme. Under each, Dennis had written in neat blue ink, same woman, new name. He'd gathered contact information too, phone numbers, addresses, notes in his tidy handwriting. There were dates, locations, even observations written like field reports. 3/12, Vanessa asked about Carol's will. Just making conversation, she said. 4/5 told Brian that Carol looked pale. Maybe she's overdoing it. 6/9 researched local senior care facilities. Left brochure in kitchen. Every entry was proof that Dennis had seen the danger coming long before I did. At the back of the folder was a single line, underlined twice. Need concrete evidence before telling Brian? He won't believe me otherwise. I closed the folder and sat back. Numb, it felt like the ground under my feet had shifted. For months, I'd thought I was just a widow trying to find her footing again. I didn't know I was living inside the last chapter of a story my husband had been writing in secret. I wiped my eyes, took a breath, and stepped out of the car. Tom was waiting by the door, his eyes kind and steady. He didn't ask what I'd found. Maybe he already knew. He was protecting me, I said quietly. Tom nodded. That's who Dennis was. He knew about Vanessa. He spent 18 months investigating her. Tom's expression darkened. He told me a little, just enough to know it was bad. He said she was dangerous, but that he couldn't prove it yet. I looked back at the car, gleaming under the lights like it had never aged. He was right, I said. And now she's going to hurt Brian. Tom hesitated. You're going to stop her. It wasn't a question. I am. He reached into his pocket and handed me a business card. Dennis mentioned a private investigator, Peter Coleman. He worked with him before he got sick. Said if something happened, Peter would know what to do. The name was printed in black ink. Peter Coleman, Private Investigations. I tucked it into the folder. First, I need to go to the bank. Tom nodded. Take your time. The Shelby's not going anywhere. It's yours. I looked at him, overwhelmed. You paid Brian $15,000 for it. He shook his head. Some things are worth more than money. Dennis built this for you. I'm just keeping a promise. I didn't trust myself to speak. So I simply nodded, whispered, thank you, and walked toward my car. As I pulled out of the lot, the Shelby caught the sunlight through the glass doors, a deep burgundy shimmer. Rich and perfect. Dennis's car. His legacy. His message. And now, his unfinished mission. I didn't know what I was going to find next, or what kind of woman I was really dealing with, but I knew one thing for certain. Dennis had started something, and I was going to finish it. Asterisk, the drive to the bank felt longer than it should have. My mind wouldn't stop replaying Dennis's words, every line of that letter echoing in the quiet of the car. I couldn't decide which was worse, the fact that Vanessa had done this before, or that Dennis had known and carried that knowledge alone. Right up until the end, at First National Bank. The manager recognized me from years of visits with Dennis. Her name tag read Linda. She smiled when she saw me, then paused when she noticed my face. "Mrs. Bennett," she said gently, "are you all right?" "I need access to safe deposit box number 447, I said, handing her my ID. She nodded, professional and kind, and led me through the quiet hall toward the vault. The air inside was cool and still. The sound of the heavy door closing behind us made me flinch. I used the small key Dennis had left me. The lock clicked, and I slid the box out. Inside was a single envelope and a sealed folder. The envelope was labeled in his handwriting, "Carol, for when you're ready." I opened it carefully. Inside were several stock certificates, neatly arranged and protected in plastic sleeves. There was also a short note written on lined paper. "Carol, in 1994, I invested $5,000 as a favor to a patient's son. He was starting a tech company. Seemed smart, decent, honest. I forgot all about it until a few months ago when I found the paperwork. The company went public last year. It's called TechCore Solutions. Check the current value. You'll be all right even if you never touch the house or the car. Live well, travel, stay independent. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Dennis." I showed the certificates to the bank manager. She typed the information into her computer and her eyes widened. "Mrs. Bennett," she said softly, "these are worth roughly $340,000. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Are you sure?" She turned the screen toward me. "Quite sure." I didn't say anything, just stared at the numbers until they blurred. When I walked out of the bank 20 minutes later, the afternoon sun felt strange on my skin, too bright, too sharp. My husband had left me a secret safety net. Even in death, he'd thought of everything. I sat in my car, opened Dennis's folder again, and stared at the phone numbers he'd written down for Stanley Wright and George Murphy. 2 men, 2 lives. 2 versions of the same story. Dennis was right. I took a deep breath and dialed the first number. The line rang 3 times before a man answered, his voice gravelly and cautious. "Hello? Mr. Wright?" "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Carol Bennett. I know this is unexpected, but I believe we've both known someone named Vanessa Cortland." There was a long silence. Then a sigh, long, heavy, like he'd been waiting years for that call. "I wondered when someone else would find me," he said. My stomach tightened. "You knew her?" He gave a humorless laugh. "Knew her. One married her." He spoke slowly, every word careful, as if he'd practiced them before. He told me how they'd met in 2019 at a community center where his mother volunteered. Vanessa had been charming, thoughtful, sympathetic. His wife had died 3 years earlier, and he was lonely. "She seemed too good to be true," he said. Turns out, she was. Within 6 months, they were married. His mother didn't trust her. Said Vanessa was always asking about money, about the house, about wills and insurance. But Stanley had brushed it off until the day Vanessa began planting seeds of doubt. She'd say things like, "Your mom seems forgetful lately," or "She almost burned the soup again. What if she leaves the stove on next time?" Little comments. Small, harmless observations until they weren't. "She convinced me my mother needed memory care," Stanley said. His voice shook. "Found a facility herself, the best in the state," she said. $20,000 a month. I sold Mom's house to pay for it. $280,000. He paused. I could hear the shame in his voice. 2 weeks after the move, Vanessa disappeared. Bank account empty. Every cent gone. She took my mother's savings, our joint account, everything. The police said it was technically legal. She was my wife. She didn't even leave a forwarding address. There was a quiet sob, quickly smothered. My mother died 6 months later. She kept asking when she could go home. I closed my eyes. I'm so sorry. He cleared his throat. Don't let her do it again, Mrs. Bennett. She's methodical. She'll make your son believe you're losing it, that you're confused, forgetful. She'll suggest an assisted living facility. Then she'll take control of the finances. She's done it twice that I know of. Probably more. His voice softened. Document everything. Every comment, every bill, every word. She's clever, but predictable. I will, I promised. When I hung up, I sat for a moment, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Dennis had been right about everything, and it wasn't over. I called the second number. George Murphy. A voice answered briskly. Mr. Murphy, my name is Carol Bennett. I believe we both knew a woman named Vanessa Cortland. Another long pause. Then, yeah, he said quietly, I've been waiting for this call too. His story was eerily familiar. They'd met at his father's funeral in 2021. She said she'd been there to support a friend, but somehow she'd ended up comforting him instead. She made me feel like she understood grief, he said. She said loss brings people together. Within months, they were inseparable. 8 months later, married. My dad owned an auto shop, he said. 40 years in business. I couldn't keep it going after he died. Vanessa said it was time to sell. Said we could travel, start fresh. He laughed bitterly. I sold it for $195,000. 3 days after the money hit our account, she was gone. I could hear papers rustling in the background. I tried to track her, he said. Found out she went to Costa Rica. By the time I got there, the money was gone. Washed through accounts across 3 countries. The cop said she was untouchable. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said, your son, does he have access to your finances? No, I said. Not yet. Then you still have time. She's not after him. She's after you. She'll start small, build the story. Don't let her. Once she convinces him you need help, it's too late. I swallowed hard. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Stop her, he said simply. For all of us. When I hung up, I stared at Dennis's folder again, open on the passenger seat beside me. Every line of his handwriting now had a voice attached to it. The voices of the men who had lived the nightmare he'd tried to stop. He hadn't just been suspicious. He'd been right. I drove home slowly, past the hospital, past the park where Dennis and I used to walk in the evenings. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. It should have been beautiful. But all I could think about was Vanessa, the smile, the calm voice. The way she touched Brian's arm when she spoke. She was already setting the stage. And now that I knew what she was capable of, I wasn't just a widow, I was a target, but not an easy one, because Dennis had given me something she didn't expect. Time and proof. Asterisk, the next morning came gray and restless. The kind of morning that feels like it's holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table with Dennis's folder spread open before me, the photos, the letters, the marriage certificates, and tried to decide where to begin. Every instinct in me, every fiber that had once handled emergency rooms and life-or decisions, told me to act carefully. Vanessa wasn't impulsive. She was calculated. That meant I had to be smarter. I picked up the business card Tom had given me, Peter Coleman, Private Investigations. I ran my thumb over the embossed letters. Dennis had trusted him. That was enough for me. I called. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady and low. Peter Coleman. Mr. Coleman, this is Carol Bennett. My husband, Dennis, worked with you before he passed. Pause. Then a shift in tone, softer, respectful. Mrs. Bennett, I've been waiting for your call. That stopped me. Waiting. Yes, he said. Dennis and I agreed I wouldn't reach out to you unless something happened. Something that suggested Vanessa was moving against you. Has she? Yes, I said quietly. She sold my husband's car through my son. Dennis left me proof that she's done this before. Then it's starting, he said. Can you meet me? We met at a small cafe near the hospital later that morning. I recognized him instantly. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, eyes sharp, but kind. The kind of man who'd seen too much but still believed in doing the right thing. He had a folder with him. Thicker than mine. When he sat down, he said simply, "Your husband was one of the most methodical men I've ever worked with." He didn't guess. He documented. He opened the folder and began spreading out papers, credit reports, property searches, screenshots of online activity. "This is Vanessa's digital footprint from the past 6 months," he explained. "She's active on caregiver forums under a fake name, asking questions about convincing elderly parents they need help, about selling property to reduce stress. She's also been browsing real estate listings in Costa Rica and Mexico." My stomach turned. "Costa Rica," I said. "That's where George Murphy said she ran before." Peter nodded. "Patterns don't lie. She's getting ready for her next move, and it's you." He flipped to another document. Bank, data, names, balances. "These are credit cards in Brian's name. 3 accounts totaling $32,000 in debt. Luxury purchases, designer clothing, hotel stays. Paris. I stared at the numbers. "He doesn't make that kind of money." "No," Peter said, "but she does through him. The goal is to get him financially desperate. Once he's under pressure, she introduces the idea of helping mom selling your home to ease the strain. You're next in her pattern." I sat back, the realization landing like a cold weight in my chest. So this isn't about love. It's about setup. Exactly. He closed the folder. "We can't stop her yet. She hasn't committed a crime in this state. But we can document everything. Record calls. Keep notes. Build a timeline. When she makes her move, we'll be ready." "And Brian?" I asked. "How do I protect him from her?" Peter leaned forward. "You can't force him to see what he's not ready to believe. If you confront her now, she'll spin it. Say you're confused, paranoid, grieving. She'll make him choose, and he'll choose her. He has to discover it himself." That thought hurt more than I expected. "So I do nothing." "Not nothing," he said. "You build your case, quietly, just like Dennis did." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook open and started listing everything Vanessa had said or done that had seemed odd. 2 months ago, Brian asked where I kept the house deed. 6 weeks ago, Vanessa took photos of every room for design ideas. 1 month ago, Brian mentioned lunch plans we never made, then insisted I must have forgotten. 3 weeks ago, Vanessa commented that I seemed so tired lately. 2 weeks ago, a brochure for Sunset Hills Senior Living slipped out of Vanessa's purse. The pattern was there, deliberate, careful. She was building a narrative of decline. I turned the page and wrote a single line at the top. Dennis was right. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. Then I added another line beneath it. But this time she's not going to win. A week later, I came back from Paris. They looked like people returning from a honeymoon, tanned, glowing, perfectly dressed. Brian hugged me tightly at the door, smelling faintly of cologne and jet lag. Vanessa smiled like nothing had ever happened. "Carol," she said sweetly, "you look wonderful. The house looks wonderful. Everything does." She said wonderful, like it was a word she'd practiced. I'd invited them for dinner. Pot roast? Brian's favorite since childhood. It gave me an excuse to watch, to listen. Over the table, Vanessa talked about Paris, the food, the art, the hotels. She painted every detail like a travel brochure. Brian listened, smiling, proud of the life he thought he was building. At one point, Vanessa turned to me and said, "Carol, this house must be a lot to manage. It's too big for one person, don't you think?" The words hung between us, sugar-coated but sharp. "I managed just fine," I said. She smiled. "Of course. I just mean maybe you'd enjoy something smaller, more manageable." I looked at her, holding her gaze. "I'm managing perfectly well." She didn't flinch. We just worry about you, that's all. There it was, we. The word she used to make Brian feel like he was on her side. Brian nodded along, unaware he was echoing her script. After dinner, Vanessa excused herself to use the restroom. She was gone for 10 minutes. When I went to check, I found her upstairs, not in the bathroom, standing near Dennis's old office. She jumped when she saw me. Oh, I must have gone the wrong way. This house is a maze. The bathroom's downstairs, I said evenly. She laughed too lightly. Of course. Silly me. We walked downstairs together. She didn't apologize. They left an hour later, all smiles. Take care of yourself, Carol, Vanessa said at the door. We'll visit again soon as their car disappeared down Oakwood Drive. I wrote everything down in my notebook, every word, every glance. It was no longer suspicion. It was evidence. The next morning I called Brian. Can you come by today? I asked, just you. There's something I need to show you, something your father left. He hesitated. What is it? Just come, I said softly. Please. He sighed. All right? This afternoon, I hung up and stared at the folder spread across my kitchen table. The photographs, the marriage certificates, the names of men whose lives Vanessa had hollowed out and left behind. It was time. If I wanted Brian to see the truth, he needed to find it himself. I gathered Dennis's letter, the documents, and my notes. I placed them neatly on the table like instruments laid out before surgery. When Brian walked through that door, I wasn't going to plead or argue. I was going to show him the truth and pray he chose to believe it. Before it was too late, Brian arrived at 3 in the afternoon. I saw his car through the window before I heard it. He parked halfway up the driveway, not all the way in a small thing, but it told me what I needed to know. He was anxious, unsure if he even wanted to be here. I opened the door before he could knock. Come in, I said. He stepped inside, hands shoved in his pockets. His eyes flicked toward the kitchen, where Dennis's folder lay open on the table like a wound. Mom, he said cautiously, what's this about? Sit down. My voice came out steady, the way it used to when I was explaining bad news to a patient's family. Calm enough to hold back chaos. He sat but didn't relax. If this is about the car again, it isn't about the car, I said, interrupting gently. It's about your father. And about Vanessa. Brow furrowed. Vanessa. What about her? I handed him the letter first. Dennis's handwriting, his careful words. Read this. Brian scanned the page, frowning deeper with each line. I could see the denial starting to form even before he finished. Dad was investigating Vanessa. He said finally, Mom, come on. You know how paranoid he got near the end? He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. Stayed still. He was thinking very clearly. Keep reading. He flipped the page. His jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. Vanessa hasn't done anything wrong. He just didn't like her because she's confident. She's not confident, I said quietly. She's calculated. Mom, look at the evidence, I said, sliding the photos across the table. 2 weddings. 2 different men. Same woman. Same eyes, same smile. Brian hesitated. This could be anyone. Then call them, I said. Their names and numbers are there. Stanley, right? George Murphy. Your father spoke to them. I did too. Call them and hear for yourself what she did to their families. He pushed the papers away, rising from the chair. This is insane. Vanessa loves me. She's my wife. She wouldn't. Your father died trying to prove it before she destroyed you, Brian, I said sharply. He didn't make it in time, but I will. The silence between us was thick. His face went pale. You don't know her like I do, he said softly. No, I replied. But your father did. He stared at me for a long second, then turned for the door. I can't do this. You're making me choose between you and her. I'm asking you to choose the truth, I said. He slammed the door behind him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark kitchen, Dennis's folder in front of me, and tried not to imagine what was happening in Brian's house. The shouting, the lies, the disbelief. I knew Vanessa well enough by now to guess how she'd handle this. She'd stay calm, patient, careful. She'd make him think I was delusional. It was past midnight when the phone rang. Mom. Brian's voice was cracked raw. I called them, he said. Stanley and George. I called them both. I didn't speak. I just listened. They said everything Dad wrote was true. Every word. His voice broke. It's the same story. She did it to them exactly like this. Tears stung my eyes. What happened then? I confronted her. His voice trembled. I asked where she grew up, what her maiden name was. She gave me answers that didn't match what she told me before. Different towns. Different colleges. Everything changed. He paused. I could hear his breathing quicken. When I asked about the credit cards, the ones Peter found, she lost it. She said I was ungrateful that I didn't trust her. She started packing a bag. Said she was leaving for good. Asterisk, she left an hour ago. I've been calling, but she won't answer. Stay there, I said, already reaching for the phone. Don't leave the house. I'm calling Peter. Oh, Peter answered on the first ring. She's moving, he said before I could even explain. We've been tracking her cards. She just made several cash withdrawals over $12,000 and checked into the Marriott near the airport. She's running, I said. Yes, he confirmed. And she just booked a one-way flight to Mexico City. Departs at 6 a.m. My stomach dropped. Can the police stop her? They can now, he said. Arizona and Florida have both issued warrants under the name Linda Marsh. That's her real identity. Linda Marsh. Vanessa Cortland never existed. She's wanted for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. We can have local detectives at the airport within an hour, but we'll need Brian to confirm the fraudulent credit cards. I'll make sure he's there by 3 a.m. Peter and I were in his car, Brian in the back seat. He looked broken, exhausted, pale, his eyes hollow but determined. What would Dad do? He asked softly. I turned around, met his eyes. He'd finish what he started. He nodded. Then let's do it. The streets were empty, the city half asleep. When we reached the airport, dawn was just beginning to thin the darkness. Inside, the terminal buzzed with that early morning energy. Rolling suitcases, murmured announcements, the smell of coffee. We stood near a column by the security checkpoint, close enough to see without being seen. Peter spoke quietly into his phone. She's here. Gate C, the detectives moved into position, 2 plainclothes officers near the checkpoint. Another by the exit dot, and then there she was, Vanessa, 2 suitcases. Designer coat, sunglasses, despite the hour. Her expression calm, confident, like a woman heading to brunch, not fleeing a warrant. She handed her passport to security, smiling politely. Ma'am? One of the detectives said, stepping forward. We need to speak with you. She turned, surprise flickering just long enough to betray her. Is there a problem? He held up his badge. We have a warrant for your arrest, Linda Marsh. For a moment, the air itself seemed to pause. Then Vanessa smiled, sharp and small. You're mistaken. My name is Vanessa Bennett. Please step aside, the detective said. She glanced around, assessing, calculating. Then, in a sudden blur of motion, ran. The sound of her heels clattered against the polished floor, echoing across the terminal. People turned, startled. Security moved fast. 2 officers caught her near the departure board, tackling her to the ground as she screamed, "Get off me!" I haven't done anything. Her suitcase burst open, spilling cash, stacks of it, bound with rubber bands. The second case contained passports, credit cards, and a hard drive. As they pulled her to her feet, her eyes found us. Found Brian. Her calm cracked. Rage burned through the mask. You, she hissed. You did this. Brian didn't answer. She lunged forward, shouting, You're pathetic. Weak. Just like your father. The officers held her back. Then she saw me. Her voice dropped to a snarl. You interfering old woman? You should have stayed out of this. You should have died already. Her words echoed across the terminal. Sharp, venomous, final. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not as the polished woman who'd fooled my son, but as the hollow thing beneath. They dragged her away, still cursing, still fighting. The noise faded into the distance for a long moment. The three of us just stood there, me, Brian, and Peter, in the middle of the terminal. People watched, whispered, pointed. Brian's shoulders sagged. His eyes filled with tears. I reached for his hand. "It's over," I said softly. He shook his head. "No, Mom, it's just starting." 2 weeks later, we gave our statements to the detectives. They told us Vanessa Linda Marsh had confessed to multiple counts of fraud and identity theft across 3 states. The money she'd stolen from previous victims was gone. But she'd face federal prison. Brian's credit cards were cleared as fraud. The house, safe. It wasn't justice in the grand sense, not the kind that restores everything you lose. But it was enough. That night I sat in the garage again. The lights were off, the space still and quiet. The oil stain was there, the pegboard of tools, the faint smell of leather and soap. And for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like Dennis was still there, watching, making sure we were safe. Asterisk spring turned into summer quietly that year. The air was warmer, softer, the kind Dennis used to call driving weather. 2 months had passed since the arrest. The court had moved fast. Vanessa, or rather Linda Marsh, had taken a plea deal. 12 years in federal prison. Maybe less with time served, but enough. Enough to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone again. Brian had moved back into the house. He said it was temporary, but I didn't believe him. He slept in his old room, the one with the football posters and the worn-out desk, and spent his days helping around the house, trying to piece together a life that no longer looked like his own. Grief has a way of reshaping people. For me, it had been quiet and slow. For Brian, it came all at once, a flood that left him raw and emptied. He'd begun therapy twice a week. Some days he was okay. He'd cook breakfast, mow the lawn, hum to himself like his father used to. Other days, he barely spoke. I never pushed. Healing isn't a straight line. I'd seen enough recovery rooms to know that the house felt different now, not empty, but still rebuilding itself. One Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the low rumble of an engine outside. It was a sound I hadn't heard in months, but I knew it instantly. The Shelby. I froze. The mug slipped slightly in my hand, spilling coffee on the counter. Out the window. Sunlight flashed against deep burgundy paint. The car gleamed in the driveway. Perfect and alive. Tom Graves stepped out from behind the wheel. Brian came downstairs at the same moment. He must have heard it too. For a second, we both stood there staring through the glass like two people seeing a ghost. Tom waved. "Thought I'd bring her home," he said when we stepped outside. Brian walked forward slowly, his face pale. "You're kidding?" Tom smiled. "She belongs here, Brian. Always did." I looked at him, stunned. "Tom, you paid $15,000 for this car." "You don't have to." He shook his head. "Some debts aren't paid in money. Your husband gave me my start. This is me keeping my word." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The sun caught the chrome and the Shelby looked almost new, the same way Dennis had left it. Brian's eyes were wet. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly. Tom put a hand on his shoulder. "You were a victim, not a villain. Your dad knew that. He wanted you to learn from it, not carry it like a weight." We opened the garage door. The space was exactly as Dennis had left it. The workbench, the tools, the old radio. Tom backed the Shelby into its place. The tires fitting neatly over the faint oil stain that had been there for years. When the engine shut off, silence filled the space. But it wasn't the hollow kind anymore. It was full, warm, steady, alive. Tom got out, looked around, and smiled. "He'd be proud of you both," he said. "You stopped her. You protected your family. That's what he wanted." Swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you, Tom, for everything." He nodded. "Just keeping a promise." He stayed for coffee, told a few stories about Dennis from years ago, the day they'd met. The first time Dennis talked about restoring the Shelby. He said he wasn't building a car, Tom said, smiling softly. He said he was building something that would last longer than him. When Tom finally left, the house felt lighter. Brian stood in the garage staring at the Shelby. He didn't move for a long time. I sold it, he said at last, voice thick. I sold Dad's car for a trip with a woman who almost destroyed our family. I walked over, laid a hand on his arm. You didn't know? And he forgave you long before you needed it. Brian shook his head. I should have listened to him. He tried to warn me. I called him controlling. That's the last thing I ever said to him. I reached into my pocket and took out Dennis's letter, the one I'd been saving. Then read this. Brian took it, unfolded the paper, and read, Brian will never believe me without proof. But I don't blame him. She's good at what she does. He's not weak, just trusting. He'll see the truth when he's ready. He's my son. He has my heart. And I'm proud of him no matter what. When Brian finished, he didn't speak. He just sat down on the old work stool, his shoulders shaking silently. I sat beside him. And together we cried for Dennis, for the lost time, for the things said too late. When he finally looked up, his voice was small. I wish he could see this. See that the car's home? See that I finally understand? I smiled through my tears. He does. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, Brian came into the kitchen holding Dennis's work journal. I think I'm ready, he said. Ready for what? He smiled faintly. To learn. We went to the garage. He opened the journal to a page marked with a folded corner, teaching Brian, age 12. Start with the oil. Always check it first. A car can't take care of you if you don't take care of it. Brian rolled up his sleeves. We lifted the hood together. The smell of grease and steel filled the air. Familiar. Grounding Dot, he found the dipstick, checked the oil like the journal described. His movements were careful, focused. This feels right, he said quietly. Like I'm supposed to be here. We spent the morning in the garage following Dennis's notes step by step, checking the fluids, cleaning the air filter, testing the spark plugs. Hours passed without us noticing every turn of the wrench. Every small fix felt like stitching something broken back together. When we finally closed the hood, Brian smiled for the first time in months. I forgot how much I loved this, he said. Working with my hands. Being in here, your father would be so proud, I said. He nodded, his eyes glistening. So would he. A few weeks later, it was time we stood side by side in the garage. The Shelby waited, gleaming under the morning light. I held the keys. You ready? Brian grinned. You first. The leather seat was cool under me. The steering wheel fit perfectly in my hands. The same hands Dennis once held when he taught me to drive. I started the engine. The sound filled the space, deep, powerful, alive. We backed out of the driveway slowly. The wind through the open windows smelled like spring and motor oil and memory. Where to? Brian asked. Anywhere, I said. Everywhere. We drove through town, past the hospital where I'd spent most of my life, past the park where Dennis and I used to walk, past the places that had seen every version of us. The Shelby ran smooth, steady, strong. When we pulled back into the driveway an hour later, Brian laughed. He'd lose his mind if he saw us right now. He's seeing it, I said. He's right here. He parked in the garage, the car fitting perfectly into its old place, as if it had never left. The house was quiet that evening, but the lonely kind of quiet. It was peaceful. Whole Dot, I looked out the window one last time before bed. The Shelby gleamed under the soft light. The garage door slightly open, the air still. Dennis had been right all along. He had built something that would last longer than him. Not just a car. A legacy. A lesson. A family that finally understood. And as I turned off the lights, I realized something I hadn't felt since the morning he died. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't alone.